this morning. I don't know why, but at, at breakfast I had a certain something came to mind. I was observing a situation in my mind. It wasn't in front of my eyes, and I realized something. How I'll try to say it in different ways, but then we have this tendency to to criticize those who are similar to us. On the other hand, if we see the other side of the coin, we have this tendency to react. We have this tendency of reacting in the same way that we criticize. Like, you don't say hello to me, and so I'm not gonna say hello to you. But if you think that not greeting someone is bad, why would you not greet someone? Or a situation, for example, you're aggressive towards me. You don't talk to me in the way I think you should, etc., etc. And so what do I do to you? The same. It, is this far from your own reality? No, I mean, it's really close, isn't it? Like, I don't know. I'm thinking today I was thinking about something and I thought, oh, look at my family. Because, and each one has his own, but because in my family there's no affection, because people say things in an aggressive way, or this, that, or the other. But the way that we ourselves relate to those people, the same ones that we're complaining about, we react in this, we react in the same way. Why? Also, because in the West we like to so much to ask why. If we were in the East, we wouldn't be asking why. They would just tell us, what to do. But our culture, understanding why helps us. So I was thinking, why? Why do we have this tendency to, we recognize something is not good, and then we actually react in that same way. I'm thinking, for example, someone who treats me with aggression, or someone who hurts me, somehow that harms me. What's our reaction? I'm upset. I'm upset because you are doing something that, in my opinion, you shouldn't do. It's not good to act like this, to behave like this. And so what do I do? As a reaction to your behavior that I think is wrong, what do? I have, I have, I do the exact same thing. Instead of doing the opposite, if I think that it's not right to treat someone in a certain way, I think that the way you're treating me is not good, and I want the opposite. What would be the most logical way to behave? It would be to behave with respect, with kindness. The opposite of what I'm complaining about. If I say this isn't good, then I should look for a behavior that is opposite, or at least not have that same behavior that I complain about. I don't know exactly why we do this. On one side, I think that it there's a part of us that somehow uses others as a mirror for ourselves, as our own mirror. So when we recognize something that's not right, there's a very unhealthy mechanism where, and it's not always like this, but it can happen, where as soon as I am against something and I want to, and I'm against that thing, somehow I my conscience is fine. Even if I do the same thing, let me explain myself better. It's a mechanism that doesn't match. It's not logical. For example, I complain that you act in a certain way, and then in the end, I react by behaving in the same way. But I'm not acting like that. I'm simply reacting to your behavior. But I see it I see it as a I I see it as a reaction to yours, so I justify myself. And so I say, since I'm against this kind of behavior, this way of being, this way of doing, etc., etc., so the fact that I react like that, I'm the victim here. I wouldn't want to be like this, but I am because others are like this. I don't want to to be disrespectful or not show affection, but the others are like that towards me, and so what else can I do? I don't know if this is clear, but what happens is we have different levels, with different levels of how things come out. There's a conceptual level where we talk, we stop, we think, oh, I'm going to do this for this reason, I'm not going to do that for that reason. I go here, I go there, we calculate things. I mean, there are those who are more like this or more or less like this. I'm calculating. I'm not like this at all. I'm just not able at all to to use. I'm not so able to manipulate things in a pejorative sense. Oh, I'm going to do this, and so that this happens like that. I mean, in some cases, it is absolutely fine to program things and try to do things in a certain way. But there's another aspect instead where one follows what one feels from his gut. Um, one reacts to a certain situation or follows an intuition, like saying, I know where I'm I know where I'm going, but exactly why I'm not sure, but I'm going to go in this direction. But the point is, I mean, we are the we are the union of so many things. There's a part of us that follows logic, a part of us that follows that 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 reacts to things that we learned from childhood. It's not a question of, oh, I shouldn't do this because I've understood. I mean, conceptually, yes, I've understood that I shouldn't do that like that, but I learned much, much earlier than understanding what a conceptual reason is. I learned how to react in that way. This morning, then and then after I needed to prepare an article, a kind of interview for a disciple in Brazil on mental health. And thinking about that, one point that I was thinking about was the question was, what are some of the activities? What can one do on a practical level to better one's mental health? And excuse me if I'm so direct. I mean, one can do so much. I'm putting my hands up. I'm saying that there is a lot that one can do, but the damage, the damage that was done during childhood takes time to fix. The things that people learn on a non-conceptual level uh, in that first phase of life, it takes time to fix all of that. For example, I've thought about this a lot with my little puppy because when when she came really small, she was just a few days before being 2 months 2 months old, and they were saying, "Be careful, you have 2 months of window, a window of 2 months. She's still growing, and what you're able to teach her in these 2 months, that is going to to stick for her whole lifetime. And then that adolescence, when the adolescence is after 1 year, it's almost as if she has as if the puppy has forgotten everything that had been taught, that she had been taught, like humans actually, and so need to to relearn and also question, to try things and see if contest a little bit what was learned. And they told me, they said, what you're able to teach in that period will stay forever. If you train in the wrong way, it, what you're able to do in those first 2 months, if you teach the wrong things, it's going to take 3 years to change, to fix that. The difference with us human beings is that our time frame is different. But what we learn, not on a conceptual level, but on an experiential level, an emotional level, in the first 7 years of life, that we bring that with us our entire lives. Of course, it can we can change, but that really takes time. I think we've all passed that phase, that window of possibility up to 7 years. It's long gone. So what happens is there are certain aspects of our personality, of our way of being, that when we find ourselves in front of certain situations, they don't have they 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 don't have to do with our reasoning, but with our experiences of the past, our education on a deeper emotional level, how we learn to interact with the world. And there are of course very positive aspects, but also negative aspects, and we live through what we've learned. I know people, for example, I'm thinking of a person during childhood found a tremendous incoherence between trust and non-trust. So that same person that is taking care of me with affection, someone I should trust, if I find also aggression in that same person I'm supposed to trust, I go back to here my story to the puppy. So something that they told me was, be careful, because with this breed of dog, they have one aspect, one characteristic. If you're aggressive, even just once, especially in that first year, without a reason, a clear, specific reason, they will lose trust in you for the entire life. So what happens if we if there's a child, a baby, an adult, a father or mother near the baby, so the adult is the one that I, as the child, should trust. There are moments where I'm in trouble, and you protect me, you give me food, you take care of me, and then at a certain point you have a reaction that I don't understand, where I expect a certain emotion, and instead there's another one that doesn't match. And what happens when we're in front of someone who is acting in an aggressive way and we don't understand why, or where we expect affection and we get slapped. I mean, metaphorically speaking, what happens? That next time that we go there, if I ask you if I ask you, can I have some water, and you get angry with me, am I going to ask you for water the next time? So, no, I am blocked. The example that I've given many, many times is that time where I came to the Kunpen and I drank water, and I had salty water. It was a very, very hot day of summer. I was here. I took a sip of water, and it was extremely salty. I tried not to make any funny face because I didn't want to trouble the one who had prepared the water. At the end of the evening, I said, "This water." This water is really salty. And they're like, what? No. I said, oh, taste it. And what happened was our dear, dear friend Linda at the time, is she, now she's not living in Milan anymore. She used to take care of the center, many aspects. She was hours at the center, and she had just come back from her summer vacation, and um, she had brought, um, salt water, water from the seaside because she had cirrhosis, and so she had these bottles, the bottles of water that she had taken from the seaside, and she just left them here temporarily, and the people who prepared the water for me, they didn't know, and they poured that water, and we laughed about it. But then following week, um, um, when I arrived, that the people who were here said, Lama, we really checked. We checked the water. I mean, conceptually at that point, I knew it wasn't salty, but that when I went to drink it, I was still quite cautious. Okay, because what speaks louder, what we know or what we feel? What we feel, what the experiences that we've lived talk much louder, not what people have explained to us. What speaks louder are the times that we were afraid, or the times that we were joyous, or when we felt really strong emotions, when we feel really strong emotions connected to something specific. That has a very strong effect on us. Something else comes to mind. It's it's an example. I don't agree, but in this specific case, it works. So when I was in India, um, someone was was um, teaching me. Um, it was teaching me Portuguese, and so in Portuguese there are accents even more than in Italian. So they said, "Don't wait don't wait to get to the end of the word to put on the accents. As soon as you write the letter, put the accent, and otherwise you're going to forget." Um, so I was never a genius for the Portuguese language, but there I was writing, and as I was writing, this person was tutoring me in Portuguese, and behind me, this person was behind me watching, and every time I would write a word, and I wouldn't put the accent on the letter immediately, he would slap me on my head really strongly. The first time, the second time, the fourth, and the fifth time, I didn't make any more mistakes. I never wrote a word again without writing immediately, putting on the accent. I'm really against this kind of technique. They 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 create some negative side effects that take a lot longer to fix than the problem of having the right accent on the 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 letter. Now with the automatic spell check, I don't even need to worry. That's another topic. Anyway, what I mean to say is when we have an experience beyond what actually happens from a so-called objective level. I say so-called because, let's say, that's what's happening in a generic way to the eyes of everyone present. But how is it that we're living that experience? When we talk about traumas, it's not that important what actually happened, but how how that person lived that experience, and how he continues to bring that experience um, um, to his present, because that action ends, it's finished, and we don't need to be talking about did it happen, how did it happen. The question is, how did I live this experience, that wound that I have, or that beautiful experience that has stayed with me, how did I live that? For example, it comes to my mind a situation with it's still that same person who who could have lived an experience very badly, but this my Portuguese teacher, I I I lived an experience instead of with fear, with almost as a challenge. So um, so so the memory that the memory that is left with me instead how how we live the experience is what's important. That really goes beyond to what actually happens. If we live something as a challenge, for example, then we can feel a lot of self-esteem and we feel stronger, etc. But it's said that the mind of a child is much is much more active than the mind the 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 brain of an adult. You know, a 6-month-old is much more active than 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 many than than adults. That 6-month-old is learning so much more than adult's brain is learning. Um, so, um, kindergarten or nursery school is much more important than university. And I'm not joking. In Brazil, I've met friends who had his brother who then died, and then they continued this school where they would the highest quality education, giving food and all the right food, you know, for children up to 7 years old, if poor children, poor families. This was in Búzios, so near Rio de Janeiro. And what would happen is these children from from early childhood to 7 years old, they had a very, very high quality education, much better than the public schools. But then, but then the following year, they would have to go to the public schools, which was much, much worse. And someone would say, why not put it, why not invest also into the after? And they said no, that when the children have a good basis up to that age, then they're able to adapt. Those instead who those even if they had to then be integrated into a poor school, they would adapt and succeed. Just all of this to say, in those first 7 years of life, we're learning so much. I see something for the first time. What do we do when we see something for the first time? We ask ourselves, what is it? How should I interact with this thing? Should I be attracted to this or not? Is it good for me? Is it bad for me? When we see something for the first time, we're curious. We want to understand. We want to know. The second time we find ourselves in a similar situation, do we have that same curiosity or do we already know? Normally, we say, "Oh, I know that already." So I don't go to know something. I go to re-know something, to recognize something. So instead, in that first 7 years of life, we're knowing things, and as we go on, we know, we learn less and less, and we recognize more and more. One of the problems in recognizing, re-knowing, is that we're closing ourselves up to see different perspectives. We're closing ourselves up to other possibilities, and we stay linked to that previous experience. So here in this place, I'm not going to drink water because I don't know how can I trust this glass of water that looks exactly like that glass of salty water. I know how it is. Now, this is an exaggerated example, of course, but our tendency is to take our previous experiences and we lived them. They're solid. And then we say that what I have in front of me is the same. I've already lived this, and on the basis of this, we generate attraction, aversion, we react in front of things, etc., etc. And one of the things that I think is really important, beautiful, is our ability to, I don't want to use a term, like, going back to childhood or becoming a child again, but having this curiosity, this humbleness, allow ourselves to know, to diminish a little bit that arrogance that we developed as we get older, this arrogance of knowing, think, saying, this is like this because I know it's like this. It's clear that our experiences in the past are important and we should give value to our experiences. If I if I put my hand on a flame once and I'm burned, I'm not going to put my hand on a flame, an open flame again. But there's so many different aspects. The situations are different, the people change, and I'm changing too. That same type of situation lived in two different types, in two different phases of life. They're two different experiences. A very clear example is a very clear example would be watching the same movie twice. The first time, wow, full of emotion, and then after a few years, one watches that same movie and asks himself, why did I like this? Or the opposite can be true. Uh, So have this kind of lightness and a kind of humbleness where we are ready to know, we're open to know, and not just re-knowing, recognizing, because our attitude in re-knowing, recognizing something, we 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 see a situation already, expecting to know everything about it, and we're living that experience through the filter of our past, where most of the things that, and even the things that we were living in the past were also lived with a filter of a previous past. But there are so many other filters. I don't know if it's ever happened to you at a certain point to say, "Wow, oh," and just to see something from a different point of view. Maybe you've always seen something in one way, and at a certain point, oh, maybe it's like this. It's a very strong experience. So this can happen every day. But what doesn't allow that to happen is our attachment and somehow our arrogance, we can say, in thinking that we already know how things are. Because we inevitably live this present moment through our past. And as I said before, there are this three aspects come together. This conditionings that we've generated since childhood, emotions that are present in the present moment, and our knowledge, this logical process, and what we know. And so through these three things, we interact. It comes to my mind an example that I saw once that I really liked. I was in Brazil and I saw on TV a program. I saw it only that one time. I don't know the name of this series. It was a kind of soap opera. It was a different because the soap operas in Brazil normally they they show they show the lives of very rich people, and we're in a country where most people live um, live poorly. There's a lot of poverty in Brazil, and so the soap operas are for those the soap operas are geared for poor people, but showing the lives of these very rich people. Instead, this soap opera was the life of a poor person, and and it was all there was this poor person, and all the people in the show were poor. And at a certain point in this scene, there's this lady and her husband, and he was sitting on the couch watching TV, and she comes and she starts complaining. She says, "Why? You know, before you used to look at me, you used to give me attention, you would talk to me, and now not even that. You don't even work anymore. I'm the one who works all day long, and after a long day of tiring work, you don't even look at me. You know, little by little, I'm gonna find someone else." And there's this scene that she goes, she 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 leaves the house quietly, and then he's still on the couch, and she comes home in the morning, and she goes to work, and then she comes back in the evening. She said, "Oh, something's wrong," and he was actually dead on the couch. And then in the next scene, she brings in her new man, and and then she's saying, "Oh, how beautiful! Now we can live together." And then in the following scene, there she is. Her new man is on the couch. She's on the couch. He's on the couch watching TV, not looking at her. And then there's another scene where she she said, there's another scene where she just pushes the couch over, and she says, "I've understood that the problem wasn't my husband, the problem was the couch." What does that mean? It means that there's certain behaviors that are that are made up from the context, not just the person. Um, of course, there are people with the predispositions, with similar predispositions, and then in a certain situation, then they have this the same behavior. There was this documentary I saw, and it was called Dishonesty, the truth of lies, and it was a study on human behavior. And at a certain point, he asks, "Ah, in your opinion, is there a country where people try to cheat more than others, or lie and cheat?" And it was full of people from many, many different countries. And in your opinion, between Pakistan and Sweden, for example, is there a difference? One says yes, someone laughs, someone says no. Uh, and so gave many different examples of countries, and people were calling out yes, no. And he said that they ran a study, the exact same study in 90 countries around the world, the same exercises, and they were all identical. When you put a human being in a certain context, the tendency, generally speaking, is to react in a certain way. The exceptions, even the percentage of exceptions, are the same independently of the country. And this made me reflect a lot, because we have this tendency um, to give a lot of weight to the individual without taking away any responsibility. But we don't exist as individuals, independent and autonomous. We exist interdependently, um, in our society, within the society with which we find ourselves. So a part of our behavior is also influenced by the society in which we find ourselves, the context in which we were raised. So let's go back to our starting point. I criticize a behavior, and then I act in the same way. But maybe, maybe, maybe I, have a similar contact. I have a similar culture. I was raised in the same way, etc., etc. So even if conceptually I know that that's not the right way to behave, I'm part of I'm part of that context. I have that predisposition to act in that same way. And of what's one of the very important keys in the middle of all this? Our ability to self to see ourselves, to analyze ourselves, to see ourselves with transparency and honesty. This is enormously important for our growth, our growth, because how can I say? I can have a very powerful laser, a very, very strong light. But if I direct it towards the sun, I am I'm shining light, but I'm not eliminating the darkness. I need to direct the light. I need to connect myself with the light, direct the light towards the shadow, towards the darkness. But to do this, I need to be able to see it. I need to recognize it. I need to accept it. So our ability to observe ourselves, to recognize our own behavior, recognize our reactions, our dynamics, our arrogance, our fear, our joy, our compassion, our love, all the characteristics of our personality, but being able to see ourselves with affection, with love, without victimizing ourselves, without trying to justify anything. Because normally, when we see something we don't like, what do we do? Do we accept that aspect and we direct our being to change that aspect, or do we try to to blame ourselves or someone else? Or do we negate that aspect? Because very often our tendency is when there's something that's not right or not good, we pretend that it doesn't exist, or we victimize ourselves and we say that it's someone else's fault, or we 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 blame ourselves and we say I need to suffer because I'm so bad, as if suffering would 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 free us from this behavior. Uh, this this scene, when I talk about this scene always comes to my mind. It's interesting because sometimes we're a little bit strange. It's a little bit like if I say it doesn't exist, it doesn't exist. It's not there, it's not there. I'm thinking of a very well-known person, Steve Jobs, for example. I read his biography, and one of the strange character um, um, one of his strange traits was that he would say that some things didn't exist, even though they were clearly in front of him, but he would say they didn't exist. One of these was that he didn't have a child. Um, um, so, for example, he was starting his career, but he had a baby girl who was born, but he said, I can't follow my career and raise a child, so he didn't have a child. Um, also, for example, for parking, it was very strange. If it said no parking, for him that just didn't exist. He would park. But as if saying something didn't exist made it so, and that's not true. This also reminds me of a scene that I saw. Made me think of many things. Was coming back from a trip, and I was on, I don't remember where I was, but was arriving to Albagnano, and there was somebody at home, alone, had been alone for a couple of weeks. Lama Gangchen was somewhere else, and I got there, and it was a Saturday, And I got home, I rested, and one of the first things you do when you come home from a long trip, you go to the bathroom, and I flushed the toilet, and it all overflowed. I called, luckily, the plumber um, who lives nearby, is also a friend of ours, and 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 he was nearby. He came and he took apart the toilet, and he found at the beginning of the tube two or three pieces, the rind of a watermelon. Like eaten, yeah, but it was quite. It hadn't been there long, and he looked at me and he said, "What did you do?" I mean, it, you don't you you don't need you don't need. Of course, you shouldn't put watermelon rind in the toilet. And I said, no, I just got back from a trip, and he said, when I go, it's never anybody else. It's never anybody's fault in the houses. And I thought, well, in this case, I can assure you, I had just gotten back. And he jokingly said, okay, okay, I don't know. I know all I know is I've found everything possible in a toilet, even in homes where there's only one person, or someone lives alone and that person doesn't know anything about it. How is it possible? There are things that just materialize spontaneously. So I went to the only person who had been staying at the house, and I said, "Have you had watermelon these days?" No, no, no watermelon. I didn't have any watermelon. It, because I said this happened. Oh no, I don't know anything about that. Uh, So just the watermelon just spontaneously materialized. I mean, there are stories of masters who are able to materialize spontaneously objects, and so. But this taught me something, that there are times that we negate something, and we negate it to ourselves, even when it's clearly, clearly there. Other times, it's clearly in front of us, or it's clearly in front of us, and we say, "Oh, it's not my fault," or we we or we find excuses. So we hide ourselves behind a finger, victimizing ourselves. Um, and and then victimizing ourselves, we justify that behavior. So, okay, maybe I threw away the watermelon rind, but there was no garbage can, for example. But it's important to be able to openly admit our errors. It's so beautiful when we make a mistake and then we say, yes, I made a mistake. I take responsibility for it. How can I better the situation? And we don't throw our responsibility onto somebody else or victimize ourselves. Sometimes it can be self-protection. Sometimes in India it would happen. There were maybe once I said something, I don't even remember what it was, but I said something to one of my masters, Ken Lakpala, and the way I said it, without having that intention at all, it created a conflict between him and another one of my masters, or one of his disciples. And this teacher came to me very angry and said, "What did you do? You created conflict between me and my teacher. It's one of the worst things I could have done, and I didn't do it knowingly, but um, I didn't understand at the moment what I had said. But when he came to me, I had already understood what had happened. So when he came, the first thing I said was, I need to apologize to you because I did this, that, and the other, and I was wrong in this and that way. My intention wasn't that, but that doesn't justify what I've done, and I I want to know what I can do to remedy the situation. Shall I go speak to this other master to explain the situation? What can I do? I'm at your disposal. And I saw that arrived and he wanted somehow to attack me. And then by putting myself in that way towards him, it relaxed. And he said, yes, it's difficult, but look, it's okay. Things, they'll resolve over time. But between us, there was no longer any conflict. And so when we normally, if when we do the opposite, where we do something stupid, because in life I mean, it happens, we do stupid things, and if we don't have the strength with ourselves to admit openly what the error was and to ask um, 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 and to apologize and try to remedy the situation, what happens? We continue. That tension goes on and on. So, something that's really important is our ability to look at ourselves in the eyes with affection, with love, and not be afraid of being who we are. N- so no fear towards ourselves and nor towards others. Is it tiresome? Sometimes it really is. Also because if I today don't allow myself to be who I am with you, and I try to uphold this idealized image that you have of me. Let's give a very simple, banal example. I want you, I want you to be attracted to me, for example. Um, maybe, maybe because it's a new job, or maybe we're a new couple. I'm there, and you ask me, let's go to lunch. Let's go have Japanese food. Let's go have some sushi. And I want you to be attracted to me. So I say, "Oh, okay, let's go. That sushi's great." When instead I hate sushi. This is not my case, but I'm just for the story. I say, "Okay, let's go just once." When at least you try to find something in common. And the next week, come, you like sushi so much. Come, let's go. How can I say now that I don't like sushi? And after a while it goes by. And okay, now that relationship is stable, my job is stable. I can say that I don't like sushi, right? But I so now so now we have a relationship that seems stable, but how am I going to now say that I don't like sushi? How am I going to say that that I lied? I need to invent an excuse. I can't eat sushi anymore. And then one lie leads to another. A little bit like when you try to keep up an idealized image that doesn't correspond to what we are. I was talking about this with businessmen in Brazil, and they said it's like when you're in an election campaign, you try to show to show aspects that you don't have, and then once you've won, you can relax. But in life, if we want to be in, if we want to have more harmony, it's important to not be afraid of who we are towards ourselves and also towards others. With this clarity of understanding who we want to become. Before this phrase that once when I was 13 years old, I went to Brazil. It was the first time I went to Brazil, and from after I had come back from the monastery in India, and my Jewish grandmother took me to Newton Bonder, who's a rabbi, and we were in Rio. We went to his apartment in Rio. He's a wonderful man, Newton Bonder. he was quite young. I was 13, and when I met him, the first thing he said, even before saying hello, how are you, he looked at me and he said, if I am me because you are you, and you are you because I am me, then I am not me and you are not you. But if I am me because I am me and you are you because you are you, then we can talk. And I said, I absolutely agree. I'm going to repeat it. If I am me, myself, because you are you yourself, if I act in a certain way because you are present, then I'm not really me. Then, and if I am me just because of your presence, then you're not really you either. But if I'm me because I really am me, and you are you because you are really you, then we can really exchange, and we can communicate. So, so any relationship, it's important to really be who you are, because otherwise, as time goes by, we need to uphold an image that we have, an image that we try to give to the others, that over time becomes very tiresome. This is an experience that I think that we've all lived on some level. And this becomes even more tiresome when we don't allow ourselves to be ourselves with ourselves. So we don't have the clarity of looking into our own eyes, to seeing our own behavior, our own emotions, and then what do? We blame others, we victimize ourselves, etc., etc. Instead, when I accept myself for who I am, I'm not when I accept myself, it means that I accept myself with love and affection, and at some on one part everything's fine. Okay, there's some aspects I'd like for them to be different. If I think for myself, there are many things I wish were different. And we have our own aspects, but I accept myself with love. I expect myself with kindness and love, and I direct myself towards what I want to become. This is one of the fundamental keys. It, it don't be opposed to the present. We should not oppose the present moment. We should accept the present and direct ourselves to the future that we want. So we have character traits. Do we have character traits that we wish were different? Do we do stupid things sometimes? Do we have reactions that in our logic we know are not good, but anyway we still have them? Yes, because we learned things since childhood that stayed there. We have our traumas, we have our wounds, we have our emotions that show up in many different ways. We all have this. We are the result of an extremely complex equation, as if we were to take a mathematical equation, as if we took a mathematical equation and we put many numbers together, and among the numbers we subtract, we divide, we multiply, we can make a very complex equation and we get to one result. And someone can ask, would ask, why is the result 5? Well, look at the equation. Because the whole of it all brought 5 as a result. If you want to see why, then have to look at the whole equation. So, well, I wish it were 6. Me too, I wish it were 6, or maybe even 7. But this equation has brought to a result of 5. If I want it to be 7, I need to find 2 more elements to add to that equation. Or if I have 8 and I need to get to 7. I need to find one to take away, to subtract. The point is, in front of an equation, I have a result, and it's meaningless to say that the equation's result is wrong. If if I want it to be different, I need to add something. I need to take something away. I need to change the actual equation and not just point my finger and blame the equation, say that it's wrong. This present moment of each one of us is a complex equation, very, very complex, where every number is the result of another complex equation. And it's crazy because you, you just need to change one number over here that the entire equation changes, the result changes. It's enough. Just look at the things in our lives. One choice made, a thought, a thought that conditioned something, something said, something done. If we think about this moment here, all of us together, how many things needed to happen in your life that for to bring you here? And maybe many of those things seemed absolutely unimportant at the time. I always think about the time where my mother, my mother, who for her 30th birthday decided to have a party. I mean, she could have said, "Oh, I don't want to celebrate my 30th birthday." I, I mean, will it change your life having a party or not have a party? It seems quite simple and banal. But why did it? But because she had a party, a friend came who had been just a few days before in São Paulo. In São Paulo, this man, his name was Professor Cheret, and he, a few days before, had been with two friends, Monica and Claudia, who had met Lama Gangchen in India, and they wanted to invite Lama Gangchen to Brazil. And so Professor Cheret told Monica and Claudia, um, um, he said that he knew the person that could help, could bring Rinpoche here because Monica and Claudia didn't have the means. So, so, so Professor Charette asked her, "Will you support? Will you organize everything and pay for everything? Have Rinpoche come?" And she said, "Sure." And a month and a half later, he was there, and it's changed the life of so many people, our lives and so many others. But I asked myself if that party had never happened, or if she hadn't had this openness to 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 talk to Professor Cheret, talk to her about her problems, and if if she hadn't shared her if she hadn't shared her problems with Professor Charette, who was also an astrologer, and he saw at that moment that she had an opportunity to do something very important, and if she had decided to not have the party, or I mean, if we say the word if we say the word if, we have no idea what could have happened. But something for me is very clear. There's so many, many small things that if they hadn't happened, this moment here today, it wouldn't exist. So this present moment of is an extremely complex equation, similar to the, similar to the law of chaos in physics. It's not that something is chaotic, but there exists a coherence among everything that's so complex that this the normal human mind, it looks at it and sees only chaos, but in reality it's not chaos. Every small part actually interacts perfectly with other parts. So at this present moment of our lives, um, has nothing to do with the law of chaos, has nothing to do with chaos. Every event, uh, if we try to look back at every interaction of the past to to figure out those parts of the equation that brought us to here, we could spend lives trying to figure it out. I don't know. Every time I talk about this subject that I like so much, I think about so many episodes connected to my life that seemed really unimportant, but without those, we wouldn't be here today. I don't know. For example, the way my parents met. I'm not going to tell you the whole story, even though it's really quite nice. If my if my mother hadn't gone to the mountains that day on vacation, then and the boy and it, and if my father had not been invited by the um, by the by the friend of her brother, then they wouldn't have met. I mean, well, there's so many examples. I'm just talking about myself. And now, if we look at the life of each one of you, so we talk about this present moment here, now, together. This is all part of this equation of the present. How many equations were necessary to bring to this? How complex is all of this? It's frightening if you really try to understand it. And this brings me to a conclusion that personally I find very comforting, that this present moment is perfect. It doesn't mean that it's the way I would prefer. It doesn't mean that there isn't conflict. It doesn't mean that there's not suffering. It means that things are exactly the way they should be, given the causes and conditions and this and the complexity of the interactions that have come before. There is coherence. This doesn't mean this doesn't mean I this doesn't mean that I don't need to worry about everything because everything is 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 it flows in the perfect way. No, we shouldn't be worried. We should take care because in this complex equation of our life, there's there's some numbers or factors that can add up or be subtracted that are that are more that are more there's a factor that is more determining than others, which is called free will, our consciousness, where we, in front of a situation, we can choose. Our range, our space of freedom, of choice is very, very small, but it does exist. And it's here where I can choose. Should I say? Should I not say? Should I act? Should I not act? Should I call? Should I call? It's these micro choices will change completely our direction. Just imagine a straight line at a certain point from this line, another line um, um, goes goes. There's another line, but there's just a half of degree difference over time. That becomes an enormous difference between those two. So small choices make enormous differences. So, so we have this small freedom that we should always apply. And this makes an enormous difference. And this takes us to this attitude that, in my opinion, is one of the most important keys in our lives, this attitude of accepting the present moment, to not being in opposition, um, to not oppose our reality, not oppose the reality of others. Don't allow us to don't allow ourselves to say this shouldn't be like this, or he or she shouldn't do like that, or that person can't be like this. This how can this be like this? It's impossible for this to be like this. No, we accept a present moment. We don't oppose the present moment, and we direct ourselves with determination towards the future that we want. We use that half a degree of freedom to direct the future that we want, because it in that complex, if in that complex equation, if one number were different, then the result would be different. And in my present moment, I am a number that actually determines also that result. It determines my immediate future and also the future that comes after. Someone could ask, but how can I act in this present moment, just adding up numbers, following this metaphor? I how can I how can I be sure by being this number, how can I be sure to get that result if I don't know what the other numbers are, the other factors that are part of the equation? Of total certainty we don't have. But if I want it to be a positive number, then I should try to add up positive numbers, multiply positive numbers. If I want to diminish something, I should try to divide and to subtract. I mean, it's just basic mathematics. So there is a consistency among parts. We don't have total control, and we don't have awareness of all the elements because the variables are of two types: those that are called cause and those that are conditions. The causes have to do with our own actions. They're individual, and they have to do with our actions, physical, verbal, and mental. The conditions are actions, interactions that come with other people, other beings around us, our surroundings, and also this action in this present moment is also the is also a condition for the future. So how you behave is a cause for you and a condition for me. Is that clear? So in this complex in this complex equation, there are those who think and do and say around me. Uh, I vary those that are near me and also those that are in the greater society. So we get to something that, how can I say? Can seem strange, but this certainty of the uncertainty relaxes me. This certainty of uncertainty relaxes. Because, why? Because in the certainty of the uncertainty, I take away that presumption that things need to be in a certain way. In the certainty of the uncertainty, the most important thing is not what is going to happen because I don't know, but what resources do I have to face whatever comes? A little bit like saying, if I go off on a ship to take a long trip on the sea, I can't have the certainty of how the currents will go, or if there'll be a storm, if there'll be wind, if there won't be wind. I don't have these certainties. What should I base myself on? How should I prepare myself? On my own knowledge, on my own boat, and my own ability to navigate well and to face situations that might arise. So I need to no, I need to 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 rest myself not on on the events, but on my own resources. In other words, just going backwards a little bit, with transparency. We should look towards ourselves. We accept ourselves with affection and with love, without opposing what we really are. We allow ourselves to see ourselves with transparency, and in front of what we see, we direct ourselves with a sense of responsibility um, towards ourselves. We direct ourselves towards what we want to become, respecting obviously the size of our legs for the of our um, as we walk, because it sometimes will be very tiring. This simple piece of advice, this of not opposing, contrasting the present moment in ourselves, because our tendency very often is about opposing the present moment. And I'm sure that if we looked at the life of everyone here, and one time maybe we'll do it. we, at a certain point we do these kind of new age things, and we get together and everyone just starts talking about their own problems. In my opinion, there's not a single person who will say, "Oh, I don't have any problems." Um, Even if you just the fact of saying that you don't have any problems, so maybe it clearly shows that you are so blocked, and you have so many problems. Sometimes this happened. Something similar happened once. We were with Lama Gangchen, and we were in the mountains of the Andes Mountains. There were about 60 people present. Very particular days. There was an artistic part, the Dharma part. It was a lovely trip. And towards the end of the trip, we were all together in this hotel, and Lama Ganchen asked each person how the experience went. And the people start opening up, but to really talk, they really were talking from a deep, sincere place, talking about aspects of their life. There was one person. I mean, this all lasted over 4 hours, and it was very, very beautiful. I remember there were many, many, many people that started crying. Even Lama Ganchen, at a certain point, he was crying, just head full of emotion. I remember my mother um, telling telling me telling me about this. She was translating, um, and there was a moment where I got emotional, and Lama Ganchen too. And as my mother was translating, um, 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 Lama Ganchen had a head. Uh, she had her head against his head, translating for forehead for 4 hours. And at a certain point, she started feeling his tears running down her cheek. It was really beautiful. Sorry, this is just a moment of memories. So it's not easy to have this level of reflection and transparency, to be without filters, talk to people who might even be theoretically strangers or anybody, say what we really feel without the filters. But if we were to take all the people who are here present and talk the about our own conflicts, our own problems, inner, outer. Is there anyone that would be out of this in the sense that wouldn't have anything to say? I don't believe that. I've known people from all walks of life, and I've never seen anyone without a problem. From far, everybody's normal. Even this concept of normalcy is well, that's another subject. But when we get a little close, we see that everyone has his 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 story, his problems, and we have our own. And it's important for us to accept them without saying this shouldn't be like this or that person shouldn't do that. Um, when we when we look at the world around us, uh, uh, you know, or even the five people that we interact most with in our lives, do we ever say, "Oh, it shouldn't be"? Does that does it happen that we say that? Yeah, but we ask ourselves, that person in that present moment, is that person a result of a perfect equation or not? Yes. And at this point, if I want that equation to be different, if I want the result to be different, my interaction my interaction with the other is part of the equation. It's obvious that the choice of that person has much greater influence on the equation. Um, but my actions are also part of that equation. The control on what will happen, how it'll happen, I have no idea. But but our but we can trust our actions and our way of being coherent. Um, Sometimes things at the beginning they seem marvelous and they bring terrible suffering, or things at the beginning seem like they would be the suffering situations become absolutely beautiful for ourselves. I mean, was it wonderful that Lama Gangchen came to the West? Was that wonderful for us? Yes. But in 1963, when Lama Gangchen left Tibet, um, would anyone in 1963 say, "Oh, how wonderful that he's left Tibet"? Uh, but it's all connected. Once I read that our life is a little bit like that childhood game where you connect the dots. But let's imagine that we are walking between one point and the next, and we can't see the drawing un, until all the points are connected. So as one point is connecting to another, we can't understand where that is going to take us. But there is also a sense of coherence among our actions. So we should accept our present and direct ourselves with awareness, generating that motto that we've said many times, that to have a high objective, a low expectation, and a constant and have constant effort. And then it's that what allows us little by little to get to our destination. Because from one point of view, if we look at the world around us, we could say, "Oh, just leave it." But in your opinion, I mean, this small group that's present here this evening, not that we're saints, huh? In the sense that I don't think to be better than anyone else. Um, um, but if but if I were ever in a situation, a difficult situation, a really difficult situation, I don't know how I would react. But on another side, I say, but I do have behavior that I think is positive. But on the other side, I don't know. I don't know how this is all going to go. But then if I look at every person singularly, I see the potential, the marvelous potential of everyone. I see that these are it's the small actions that make the real difference in 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 Buddhist philosophy, we say, the whole doesn't exist without its parts. We say in Tibetan, in Buddhist philosophy, and and then every part is a whole that is made up of parts, and so on. On a more practical level, that means that small actions are the ones that compose the whole, and they have an enormous power. We have this tendency every once in a while to think that there are these magical moments, important moments um, th- that just change the course of your life. Oh, uh, maybe one waits his whole life for the Prince Charming or for something to happen, but in reality, what happens is a result of all these small things that that interact, and this in the they interact by adding up, multiplying, by dividing, by this interacting in this seemingly um, chaotic way. And together with this, there's something I want to take advantage to say. But before this, a high objective means have an idealized image in a positive way of oneself, not so much about what we want to do, because sincerely, I I think that the level of control that we have over what we do is really quite low. It really depends on many other factors, but instead, who we want to become, the objective of who we want to become. Mm, I, I want to get old. Let's say that I'm able to have a long life. Do I want to be a patient person or a nervous person? Joyous or sad? Angry or loving? Aggressive? Generous or miserly? Said like this, what would we all say? We all would want to be calm, patient, and generous. It's like saying, do you want to lose weight or gain weight? Well, if you want to lose weight, then you need to stop eating chocolate and pasta. What do you want? Do you really? What do you want? A little bit like saying, do you want, materially speaking, do you want to be rich or poor? No, I want to be very, very rich. Okay. Do you work? No. Do you save your money? No. Do you expect to inherit any money? No. Do you play the the lottery? Uh-huh. Are you planning? Are you planning a robbery? No, not even that. So we stay in this idealized desire that doesn't match our daily lives. Because if I want to have money, I need to earn them or save them, so that so I can have more and more. If I want to be fit or lose weight, I need to have a lifestyle that matches that. And if I want to be a balanced person, satisfied, joyous, loving, patient, in harmony with myself and with others, I need to cultivate those qualities. And this, this aspect that we often just leave without realizing is that just go by without realizing, when we're not cultivating those characteristics that we want to cultivate, we're cultivating something else. In other words, this process of transformation comes every time there's an interaction. This is a law of physics, from what I've understood. This is of the very few laws of physics that I've understood. So wherever there's interaction, there will inevitably be change. transformation. So if I interact in a certain way, I will have a transformation that is consistent with that interaction. Do we have the choice of interacting or not? We interact physically, verbally, and mentally, even with ourselves. Our thoughts are interaction that create transformation, change. So in every moment in our lives, we are constantly interacting. And this constantly brings change that is that is consistent with the actual interaction. The more angry, the more the more often I get angry, the more angry I become. That interaction brings a certain transformation. And if I want to go in a certain direction, I need to to allow myself to interact in that direction. And this brings us to the law of karma, because normally we use the word karma, and I think that those who have followed the teachings, um, rarely have you ever heard me say, "Oh, because it's karma." We talk about karma, but not often about using the word, because the term has been a little bit polluted, we can say, because we live karma as if it were destiny. Oh, a little bit. If something wonderful happens, say, "Oh, I have such good karma." But if something bad happens, then it's someone else's fault. When we talk about karma, which literally means action, interaction, means that wherever there's interaction, there will be a transformation. And that all interactions that we have bring transformation, transformations that add up one after the other and gradually um, create our reality. It's in Tibetan they say that the all worlds are the result of interaction, of karma. So all of these that add up give our reality, because and it's here where we can find our freedom. If I want to be in a certain way, I need to act in that way or go towards that way. And there will be many challenges. There are challenges of our own conditionings, our present habits. They're the challenges of specific moments that we live and external influences. For example, I'm sure there are certain moments that they're moments of tension. And I realized more than once that in the same days, people even in different countries, because I'm in contact with many people all over the world. I mean, maybe people who have nothing to do with themselves, they live similar experiences on the same day in different countries. And I think that because being on the same planet, there are interactions with the environment, and we're very similar. So we react in a similar way given the influences that are present. So there are moments where there's more tension. For example, myself this last week, for a few days, I don't know exactly why, but I realized there were 2 or 3 days where I was tense. The, we use the word lung in Tibetan. It's this wind element that increases. And when it happens to me, I find that um, my inner, um, I'm faster, I'm speedier. I'm a little bit more accelerated. That you can see in my way of speaking, just my general energy, even if I stay calm, etc. Why in those days? I don't know. I mean, even all the answers I can find, in the end, they're just partial. And to me, personally, why it's like that is I don't care. I'm more interested in what I can do to be better, to feel better. But to be careful that when there are moments of tension, you need to be very careful not to be taken by these feelings, and do stupid things, because once you do something, it's done. It's it's not like if I spit in your eye, then I can go back and say, oh, well, there was tension in the air, or oh, I mean, I can bring you even a Kleenex, so you can maybe even a one that is or to help disinfect. No, now I need to fix the situation. So when we see that there's tension, for example, in a in sometimes we go to certain places where there's tension, and we meet people that have a certain level of tension. When we go to those places, something that's really important to be careful of, when we go somewhere where there's tension and we can actually feel it, and then we somehow feel tense, is when we're able to melt a little bit that tension without letting it affect us. I don't know if that's clear. There's tension. I live it. I feel it. And sooner or later, it's just going to pass. I don't let it overwhelm me. I let it just pass. Because if I react and I take that tension, I make that tension mine, and then I direct it towards something, to, you know, better to direct it towards my own conflicts. There's my aversion. There's my own frustrations. So I can direct all of that tension. So if I take all of those and I direct it, then if I do something, I'm responsible for that. So I have memory of places, for example, once in particular, I remember in India, I was in the I was in the woods, and I was walking at a certain point. There was a very beautiful energy, not far from the monastery. You weren't allowed to go towards the end of the day because there were elephants that in that area. One day we went walking a little bit further, me and my my friends from the monastery, and I remember we walked a little farther, and I remember this feeling as if I had walked through a kind of curtain. It gave me a feeling. I was joyous and calm, and I was feeling well, and I got somewhere where I felt tense, nervous, with a kind of fear inside. I looked at my friend, and he looked at me, and we said, "Let's get out of here." And then we turned around, and then we walked 5 steps backwards, and it was like before. I mean, that was a clear example. I mean, there are places that are heavily influenced. The places are influences, and of course, we're influenced by places, by people, by the moment, by thousands of things that we interact with. But one important thing is being able to feel what is, but without taking it on ourselves. I don't know. I think in many contexts, like in a familial um, context or at work, maybe you get somewhere and you can already feel that there's tension, and before you even realize that you're arguing, because one takes on that tension, makes that tension his own. And we have this strange mechanism that when we feel something, we ask ourselves, why am I feeling this? And we look for a reason. We look for, and this comes in from both directions. So if I feel tension, it's because there's something inside, aversion or sadness, something that that brings that tension. So we look for an emotion that corresponds to that tension. Obviously, we find something, and then we project it onto the situation that we're living. On the other side, when there's a strong emotion, we look for some we look for the reason um, as to why we're feeling that. Very often, we we're looking for this that storyline that can create this coherence between what we're living and what we're feeling. But it's important to understand that often there are uh, it's that sometimes there are just tensions outside of ourselves that we need to recognize and just let go of without making them our own. And then sometimes they're also our own things that we're throwing out there, our own problems that we're throwing out there. So, just getting back to our starting point, when we see behavior in others that we think are unhealthy, even if on a spontaneous level we are taken to react in the same way, also victimizing ourselves a little bit. Bec- I'm I'm ag- I'm aggressive with you. I know I shouldn't be with you. I suffer when I'm aggressive with you, but I'm aggressive with you because you're aggressive with me. We try to not allow ourselves to repeat these dynamics that we know. Sometimes we'll be able, and other times we won't be able. We won't manage. How many times has it happened to have such an emotion, attraction, aversion, whatever it is, and n- n- no matter how aware you were that you shouldn't have been doing it, you still did it. I don't know if this has happened to you. Like, I shouldn't drink the water. I shouldn't drink water. I shouldn't drink water. I shouldn't drink water. I know I shouldn't drink water. Oh, I love water. I love water so much. And then once I start drinking, I'm gonna really drink it. Okay. Happens. It happens. Because we're made up of conditionings. And so when it happens, you know, we shouldn't pull ourselves down saying, "Oh, I'm useless. I knew I, I know I shouldn't be drinking water. Everything I've done up till now, all this effort has been useless because all this meditation, all this time, it's just useless and it hasn't worked at all." Well, it's a gradual process, creating new habits. Otherwise, if it were so easy, we'd all be enlightened. If I see that I'm not able to hold back from that desire, then I need to apply on a smaller level. If, for example, if I see that I'm not able to not get angry in certain situations, then I try to not get angry in a less dangerous situation. Um, in other words, what happens is our process of growth, our growth process comes also in getting just a little bit at a time outside our comfort zone. And and to and then we need to make that space that's a little bit outside our comfort zone, make that place comfortable. And then a little bit more and a little bit more. In this situation, normally it makes me angry. But okay, if I can try to understand it in a different way, apply what I know, and 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 try say, oh, if in this situation I'm not going to get angry. Maybe I get angry in other situations, but in this situation I'm not going to get angry. So I've gone outside my comfort zone just a little bit, and I've made it comfortable until more and more uncomfortable spaces become comfortable, and little by little we enlarge that space. So we are we walk one step after another. We take one step after another. But repeating once again this whole process, it's fundamental to accept ourselves with love, with kindness and sincerity. Do not be afraid of looking at yourself in the eyes, and and be kind to yourself, accept yourself, and let's remember that our path is has to do with ourselves at the service of others, but it has to do with us, and we need to start with us. We need to work on ourselves, but not for just for us, for ourselves. If I'm working on myself, I'm giving myself an opportunity to do something for others. I can't help you be at peace with yourself if I'm not at peace with myself. So the work is to take our own responsibilities and try not to be pointing the finger onto others and to the world around us because this one does like that and she says like this. No, let's remember that every person in every moment, using the metaphor as before, is a perfect equation, just like we are. So not in the sense that it's marvelous, but in the sense that the result is that's the result. And if you add up those numbers again, that's the result. But if we want the result to be different, then we need to add or subtract the number, different numbers. Or maybe we can even multiply or divide, you know, but even just adding and subtracting is already a lot. So don't underestimate the power that is found in every action. And just one more time, I'll never get tired repeating this because I find this aspect very important. Our ability, our capacity to accept ourselves without victimizing ourselves, without blaming ourselves, and allowing ourselves to rejoice, allowing ourselves to be happy. I think it was last week when we said the phrase, um, happy, happy is he or she who knows is happy. Now I can't remember who said it. It's a Greek philosopher. It's just we accept the present with joy, directing ourselves towards the future that we want. And this doesn't mean that we pretend that the problems don't exist or don't look at the difficulties. It means seeing the complexity of the situation and saying, okay, I direct myself with faith because I know I'm doing the best that I can within my possibilities. And that, what does that mean? The best that I can. It means I'm being sincere with myself. I'm allow myself to get out of my comfort zone, and I'm sincere with myself. And I go in a direction that corresponds um, uh, I that corresponds to my objective. This reminds me at a certain point when we needed to make the center at in Albagnano, and there was the mortgage, and someone said if at a certain point you the can't pay the monthly installments of the mortgage, if at a certain point, and I started thinking about it, and I thought, well, what I thought or what I said, if one day I won't be able to pay the mortgage, it means that the center is not it is not it, it means that the center is not performing its function, that the people are not recognizing its value. I mean, the it's the function. I don't care about the bricks of the temple. It was a way of saying, "Oh, there's no reason to be afraid of the future. We should be afraid of not acting um, consistently with what it is, with the objectives that we've set. It's possible. Someone will say, "Oh, but this is really beautiful. It seems easy, but in practice, it's really difficult." Many people tell me, "Oh, when we're here, everything seems feasible and easy, but then outside, it's a different story." We need to repeat it again and again. We need to try and remember that it's just one little piece at a time. Then, that this one little piece, these little small pieces that actually make up a life. That's all for today. I want to thank you to, for being here and allowing me to reflect with you. It's time for our dedications.
Robe minsela tato ne gyurchi kewa kuntu yanda lama dang dralme cheki pela longche ching sada lamge yunte rabzo ne dorje change kopa nyurtobasho nimo dele tsendele nime kuyan dele kshin Nintzen takto delek pe koncho sumki chingi lob Kuncho sumki ngodrubutsol, kuncho sumki trashisho.
At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to obtain all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. Thank you, everyone. Just some information I haven't given to anyone. I tell you, actually, the organizers at this center. Next week, I won't be. Next week, I won't be able to come, and so I tell you already now. I I need to I need to place a stupa in a special place in the mountains. It's a place that afterwards people can then go and visit. So next week I won't be able to be here. Okay, thank you, everyone.